Welcome to this episode of Meet the Artist at Framethrower. My name is Ben Kuzol, and in this episode, I'll be speaking with Randy Link. Randy is an extremely talented and experienced stop motion and CG animation supervisor, and previous artist and supervisor, and writer and director. Randy kickstarted his career at legendary Tippett Studios, and since his animation and previous skills has brought him to the biggest studios where he's worked on some of the biggest projects, including King Kong, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, The Avengers, Godzilla, King of Monsters, Mad God, and many, many more. Randy is currently working on his own film, Dead River Dinosaurs Battle at Devil Hills, and I had an amazing talk with him. Randy is hilarious, insightful, and just a fountain of great industry anecdotes. As always, if you're an animator looking for an online community to give and receive feedback for your animation, come check out framethrower.io. Great artists, great vibes, and customized feedback tools all available at framethrower.io. And now, here's Randy Link.
Every day, federal scientists are looking for new ways to kill bugs.
Your basic arachnid warrior isn't too smart, but you can blow off a limb. It's still 86% combat effective. Here's a tip. Aim for the nerve stem and put it down for good.
Would you like to know more?
First of all, thank you so much again for doing this. This is quite the privilege. I'm tempted to just jump straight into your days at Tippett, because when I did a little bit of research on you, I saw that one of your early projects was Starship Troopers, which was evoke like many a fanboy, and I got very excited.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah,
Good one.
How was that your first project at Tippett, or?
It was, yeah, it was my first feature.
Mm.
It was my first feature, and I had come from a stop motion background.
Oh.
So I was working on a TV show, so I was working on it's like a stop motion TV show, very cartoony.
Mm.
And then I had to make the leap to one. It was when computers were taking over everything.
Yeah.
I never turned on a computer before that. So I was one of the few that worked on that DID thing, that digital input device that they made, the transition from stop mo. They used it on Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It's like a stop motion mocap suit.
Wow.
So that was what I did on Troopers, and then I would clean up. So I would do takes in kind of on 2s and 8s in stop motion, and go into Softimage and just figure out what the hell I just did. Right?
That's amazing.
So yeah. It was something else.
Was that the same technology as, well, you mentioned Jurassic Park, but I've only seen, I think most of us, we've seen, like this tiny green, the monitor with the green on it, and everything takes ages. Was that the same on Troopers?
No, it was, we got so streamlined. Like it ended up being pretty amazing. So there was 3 of us. It was me, this guy Tom Gibbons, and this woman named Carrie. And Carrie was more of a puppeteer, like a live action puppeteer type.
Nice.
And me and Gibby were both stop mo guys. And again, I have to say, what's really crucial is like the level of stop motion that I was doing was TV shows, cartoony TV shows. So when we started, I think the idea was that we could do a lot of barking dogs in the backgrounds. So we'd have the hero animators, and then me and Gibby could just fill in backgrounds. And it turned out that we got really quick, and we started blocking shots. We could block a shot quicker than the CG guys.
Whoa.
Because they were doing, a lot of sliding chess pieces, like get that timing right and then get a bounce in it. And we would lock the feet off and and literally slide it around on this table. So, and then you could animate the all of this stuff and that.
Oh,
and then go back and do feet.
Oh.
So on like a good day, if I really cranked at it, I could do like 8 pretty good performances
in a day,
and then stitch those together, and I'd have 8 bugs for the next daily doing whatever. So me and Gibby quickly started getting into pretty crazy shots.
Oh shit!
So like 30 bugs, you know, hand king 30 bugs or whatnot, and so it was a great time. The second half when I was feeling more confident. You know?
How so was that your transition into actual digital animation? Or?
Yeah, I did the DID I think for 3 movies. And then it was we were getting quick enough where we could just do it digitally. You know, so like building the armatures, and because what they did was they would build a stop motion, like let's say warrior bug.
Yeah.
And then instead of putting the skins on it, they would just have wires and encoders, and it went to a monitor. And then we had these long tables with arms that you could kind of move it around on.
Oh, okay.
So that's a pretty big process. And on each joint, there was an encoder that had an X, Y, and Z.
Right.
So there were these boxes on all the joints. It was one of the things when people came in, like the studio or the magazine folks, they always came to our table because it looked,
yeah.
It was a bunch of wires coming out of it. It looked really impressive.
Yeah.
You know, and they were, you know, it was around the time where it went from models and all this stuff to people pointing at computer screens.
Yeah.
You know, working on Starship Troopers is a bunch of people pointing at things. So, yeah, it was, but it wasn't something worth building after about the 3rd movie. We were quick enough with CG.
Oh, wow. So, you know, did you feel like it just overtook you and you had to jump on that train? Like, it must have happened so fast.
It was do or die. I mean, it was kind of like, you know, when we got over to Troopers, you know, I had to animate in a different way than I had ever done before. So I had to go from cartoons to live action 14-foot bugs.
Yeah.
Right. So that was one problem. And then the other problem was like turning on a computer and figuring out what all of that stuff was.
Yeah.
But in the cleanup process, I kind of figured out curves, you know, and stuff like that. And I mean, the one thing that was cool and I remember a lot was, you know, I would do a performance in stop motion.
Yeah.
And then I would look at my curves and they were crazy. It was like all over the place, hard, whatever. And then people over there were animating in CG and they had these beautiful rolling hills. I was like, mine is screwed up. But it turned out that that's the stuff you eventually have to put in as an animator later.
I was just
that's stuff I was getting for free, you know.
Yeah. So do you feel like the stop motion background helped you a lot moving into CG?
It was all Phil Tibbett, I have to say. He's you know, back then working with he would slap me in the head for saying it, but you know, working with a craftsman, working with somebody who just knows every part of what you're doing and film history and all of the techniques.
Wow.
He had a lot of patience with guys like me and helped us make the bridge without complicating things.
Oh.
So where I would be maybe too quick, you know, my performances were too rushed coming from cartoons, he'd say, grab the whole thing and scale it out 5 times and show me. Don't do any more than that.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'd find the rhythm and go, oh, I got it. You know, so I think stop motion helps me a little bit in the way I work as an animator. But, you know, whether it would do the same for every animator is debatable.
Yeah.
It's just a different,
Yeah.
it's just a different practice.
Yeah.
Than animating in a computer. It's hard to describe.
Yeah, no, it would seem like it because it's subtle in a very different way. Like you don't have all the curves describing, as you said, but then you have the hands-on feel, which I think a lot of us would envy stop motion animators.
You have to basically really figure out what you're going to do beforehand, which is so opposite of how we work now. You have to really plan it out. And then you just go in and then you lose that plan very quickly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then you're just like, to the end.
Yeah.
But in there, there's this really great thing that happens time-wise where you start to be able to see everything. So you do a 10-hour take, you do a 10-hour shot, and about 2 hours into it, you're forgetting everything. The button you push, the thing you're writing down, and all you're seeing is that thing moving.
Yeah.
Your brain is putting the both ends on it. You get into this little place where you just kind of know what it's doing. Or when it tells you, nope, we're going that way, you roll with it.
Wow.
So it's just a different discipline, really.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like when I'm animating, there is definitely a back and forth between you and the piece. Like you can tell, is this actually going to work? And then you can see from the motion on the screen, yeah, or maybe not. And then sometimes you just have to force it too much. And it's after a while, you start to realize that that's because it's not working.
Yeah.
And it seems like what I'm hearing is that in stop motion, you have to clear that up along the way as you go.
Or you gotta lie to them and tell them it didn't work and redo it.
Yeah.
I've been in that one too,
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, it's definitely informative in a way, like sculpting, or I would, like even playing an instrument, your brain and your hands are still, you're somehow still practicing animation if you play guitar or piano, because that contact and it's a completely different discipline.
Yeah.
And I don't put any glory on it.
No.
Like whenever I watch stop motion movies, I think, God, I just know how hard it is. Right? Yeah. I don't go like, oh my God, it's so smooth. I'm just like, whew, that's a lot of shot's amazing, but
yeah.
He was suffering.
Yeah, I bet that because I feel like when there's a really tricky shot in 3D, I can feel the pain sometimes behind it, especially if you can see all the things moving and the cameras everywhere and like, fuck, that's a rough month. But I think it's just the hands-on idea of stop motion that really feels like it would be like you're closer to it and it's more of a performance.
I would say one of the things that I can tell with animators, or at least I think I can, and one of the advantages of stop motion is like you kind of have to think sculpturally all the time, and again, I have to give it to Phil, who I was doing a stop motion thing, and he told me sometimes as a gauge, you're bringing in the surface gauge all the time. Sometimes he'll just use shadow. He'll just register in his eye where shadow is and use that as a gauge to how far he's moving the puppet.
Yeah.
You can't go into a place where, like, if you're doing a walk, you can't go into a place where you've only been looking at it in this one camera angle. You kind of always have to see how that thing is working physically all the way around. And I definitely bring some of that in when I'm blocking.
Yeah, I can imagine that's
thinking very sculpturally.
Yeah. So how long? Because I know not too long after you went to, was it Sony?
Mm-hmm.
And that must have been all digital by then, right?
Yep. Yeah. Well, I went over to the Matrix. I went over and I did a little bit on the third Matrix.
The Revolutions.
At ESC, and kind of got out of there and went down to Sony, which was a completely different vibe than, you know,
I can imagine.
You know, very particular type of studio.
Yeah, it's a bigger place, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then by that time it was, how far was it from what we know today in terms of software, and was it this similar or?
Yeah, it was Maya. It was working in Maya. You know, I went and did this project. One of the places I've been very lucky is I was like a monster kid. I'm not a comic book kid. I have a couple, but I grew up, you know, on Saturday monster movies.
Nice.
And career animation wise, I've animated just about every monster I liked as a kid in some version.
That's awesome.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
And so I went down to Sony and I was on this job called Cursed. And it started and then got put on hold. And I was kind of floating for a little while, and out of kind of boredom, I took a set from Polar Express, that little kids movie.
Yeah.
And I did this. I did a werewolf. I grabbed a werewolf, and I did an animation of him busting through the kid's bedroom. And you're the camera. I put the camera on the bed. So it's just the nightmare of that thing coming in at you.
Yeah.
And all the toys falling off the shelf. And I did it just to keep active and whatever.
Yeah.
And I ran into the producer, and he told me that they were having this big issue with the director was kind of going for the man in the suit, and I wish we just had something to show him. And I was like, well, I did this, and they put fur on it and showed it to Wes Craven, who said, that's the werewolf. And we got a whole bunch of shots.
Oh, shit.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie is, and as you know, as an animator, and on Troopers, Phil pulled us all into a room and he said, 1 out of 7 is good. So enjoy this one. It'll be about 7 years before you're on another one. You know, you're lucky.
Yeah.
So, you know, most of my reel is movies. I would tell my parents, don't worry about watching it. Yeah.
I think that's the nature of it. The first one I worked on was John Carter, and as you know, they didn't really follow up with the PR for that movie. They kind of just left it hanging. So by the time it reached the cinemas in Denmark, where I'm from, I made my parents go, and they were the only ones in the cinema, and they haven't gone since. So it's, I think after a while you realize that, am I having fun? Is this cool? You know, and then sometimes everything just align, and you get to work on one of those really cool ones, but it's a rare one. And that's why I was so excited about the Tippett thing, because that's sounded like it is a legendary studio to kind of have your first frames.
Yeah, I can't say enough about it. I mean, I could tell you stories all night. You know, there was down to, you know, there was one summer where he was going away and he gave us a little full CG thing to do. You know, just in the studio. I'm going away for a couple of weeks. Here's some storyboards. Make this.
Yeah.
And when he came back, we showed it to him, and he said, "All right, no one to get your feelings hurt." You know, and he ordered us to go and watch Jaws and watch the water in Jaws. And it's like shot to shot. It's gray, it's choppy, it's white, it's blue, it's calm, you know. And he said, that's a film because it has no continuity. And Pixar looks like Pixar because it's all continuity. The lighting is perfect in every shot. perfect. And when you shoot live action, the sun is moving on you. You get a couple of things. And I just had never thought in that way before. So to be at a studio where you're like encouraged to throw, continuity out if it feels right.
Yeah.
Is great when you're there, but it's terrible when you go somewhere else. Because they're like, the legs aren't matching. You're like, continuity. Cowards,
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, because it's so against everything we learn at the larger studios. Also because we always have to deliver something super clean, and then it's up to the director how much he wants to break, or how much he wants to break, but we have to deliver something so clean and within the boundaries always. So it must have been quite a different thing coming to Sony, but then how was it then? Because then you moved on to Weta, which at that point was really young, right?
Yeah, well, I was for Kong, so I knew some people on Lord of the Rings, and I didn't go. I decided I just want to watch it as a fan. I don't want the war story.
Oh, nice.
And then I had a friend who was working there, and I kept hearing about King Kong, which is like my reason for being in the film business. King Kong and American Werewolf in London are the two movies that made me go like, that's what.
Nice.
And so I started hearing Kong, and I would email my buddy and say, dude, how's the monkey? And all he would write me was, pack your bags. That was it. And then I got a phone interview for going out to Kong, and it was one that I didn't want to miss. So I kind of hopped around. I was at Tippett for many years. Then I went to Sony. I remember walking into this guy Robbins, who was HR for Anim at Sony, and I went like that, and he said, "You want to work on the Big Monkey?" And I was like, "Sorry." Well, but they were really great to me, So I went off and did that for a year, and then I came back, and Sony took me right back for Spider-Man afterwards. So they were really great to me.
Yeah. Well, I don't have the war stories from King Kong. I just have the fan version of it, and it was one of those movies where you remember why you want to be an animator. If you at that point, that was like 2011 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was 2006, I think, or 8, something like that.
Oh, when you
King Kong.
Oh, did it? Oh, okay.
I think so.
I think. Oh well, I guess it fits. Then it came out a few years later than after.
Yeah.
But just watching it, it's mind blowing. And there was so many creatures. And they were so good. And then all these epic fights and the T-Rex and it was so over the top, and the scope of it was amazing. I can only imagine how it must have been wild working on it.
Well, and it was one of those things too. Is like Pete's another guy who you learn a lot by just being around him.
Yeah, Peter Jackson.
PJ. And so when I went there and started seeing the artwork, I would be like, I'd write my brother and be like, "Oh, this thing is going to blow minds." I was so smitten with all of the how they approached the Kong character. It's a hard thing to do. I mean, a giant gorilla, grabs a girl. In the original movie, what worked and makes it so tragic is nobody likes King Kong. Even Anne is like, "Your monster, die." So when he's at the Empire State Building and he's like just trying to touch her and they're shooting him, it's even more tragic because nobody likes him.
Yeah.
She just was like, "He's a monster, kill him." And at the end, we're there, "We killed it."
Yeah.
So to bring that into they're going to need something from each other, story-wise, is very difficult to do, and to do it right. And I was smitten with their decisions with that.
Yeah.
You know, and then when the movie came out, everyone said was too long. So I was like, what? You know? Yeah. But I was still.
Yeah, I agree.
Right?
Yeah. There was it's been a while since I watched it, but there was probably a bit of the leading up to that could have been shortened. But then there was all these cool creatures in the jungle, and I loved it. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So, and then after that, you went back to Sony, you said?
Yeah, for Spider-Man 3.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And then, so I know that you started pursuing previous as well. Was that inspired or somehow, because the way that you talk about Peter Jackson and Phil Tippett, about these filmmakers, I could see that coming across those people would start you to kind of think more as a filmmaker yourself, and then eventually branch into previous, because that's more of a cinematography field of animation.
Yeah, I on Kong, I had my first little moment of putting an idea in a story, not just being an animator. So like my years at Tippett, I learned a lot about film, and I learned a lot about the craft of like, you know, how do you get in there and do it?
Yeah.
Of that kind of animation, the creature animation, and then with Peter, it's a lot more story, you know, and it was the first time I really got a view of intention, which I'll tell you about in a second. But so through some crazy bit, I ended up talking to Peter's partner, Fran. And she had just done a pitch to tell us about why Kong liked Anne and why Anne liked Kong. And it was so moving, like it made you cry, what she was saying. It was beautiful. And I told her, like, I'm gonna steal that, right? Like whenever I pitched stuff, I said that's cool, and she like made me go like, oh my Lord. So she didn't want to talk about herself, of course, and said, well, there's a problem we don't like in the movie, and they had an issue where Kong just keeps knocking Anne over.
Yeah,
and she slaps him, and he runs away. And then she gets into the trouble with the T-Rexes, and he comes and kills them all. And they didn't like him just claiming her. There's something about him just, at the end, the ultra male, I got the woman back. And I pitched the, well, you know, like a silverback gorilla would just get up and leave. And the family follows. So maybe he could like be like, you stay in the jungle, come with me, right? And she liked it, and then she told Peter, who I had never met, and he just looked at me and said, okay. And then I was like, oh man, I'm in trouble.
Well, because you have to animate it, or? Well,
no, because I'm telling his wife ideas about what movie.
Yeah.
Like, I'm who the hell am I?
You
know? So, and then I heard that, they're shooting that sequence.
Oh shit.
So they liked that idea and that little bit, and I didn't animate it, but that little idea that I had got turned into something and put in the movie. And that was the first time that I kind of had something that was more than just, I'll make your monster look real.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Right. This is an idea in the movie. And so when I came back for Hobbit, I animated on the first one. I jumped into previs on the second one just because I really wanted to try it, and it's really free. And I have a good friend named Christian who is running previs, and he was great and said, come and give it a shot. And I found a lot of freedom there that you don't have as an animator.
Yeah.
For good and bad.
Yeah.
So, and that was something where you'd start to pitch ideas and get in a room and sort of try to figure out what puzzle piece needs to fit, or what can we show Pete? What can we give him so he can go edit?
Yeah.
You know, and I found that really rewarding. It's, you know, he never told you if he liked it. So that was tough.
Yeah, I bet.
Just go back to the drawing board, and then you'd see it 5 months later in an edit, and you're like, "You son of a bitch, you liked it."
That's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, and you know, I know that there's a big thing between animation and previs.
Yeah. Sorry, I would love to hear your take on it. Go on.
Well, I mean, one thing is, I honestly, so I got into the whole. I originally wanted to do makeup effects.
Oh.
So I was a kid. I loved King Kong. I saw America Run for London when I was about 17, and I was like, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And I started to learn how to make molds and try to put glue shit on people's faces. And I got a job first at a bronzing foundry because I could make molds.
Oh.
Right. And then I moved to Boston, and I found an animation studio that did clay animation, and they hired me because I could make a mold and I could sculpt in clay pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And the animation part is what stuck. But I was building sets, I was lighting them, I was sculpting things, you're doing everything.
Yeah.
And for some reason in my career, it's animation what stuck. But the thing is I never really cared about animation. Like, for me, sock puppets are fine if it does the job, you know?
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be animated to me. I love animation and I love animated movies, but so I never had that. I just saw the discipline as very different. And when you work as an animator, you get the shot.
Yeah.
And you craft something, hopefully, that's really beautiful and is going to live on and really work forever.
Yeah.
You could go back to it and be like, that shot is awesome.
Yeah.
The movie's terrible. That shot is awesome. My little ching, 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 that little diamond I carved out is great. And with previs, you don't care about any of that stuff. You are just trying to like find the intention of this shot and the scene.
Right.
And one of the things that changed me was I had a shot in the Tyrannosaurus Rex fight. It was like 8 shots strung together.
Right.
And my first shot in it is Kong punching a T-Rex. And I had done this sort of very gorilla flat arm thing. I kind of looked at gorillas. I looked at how they would hit.
Yeah.
And I did this thing that was really, really gorilla, and it didn't work. And it didn't work. And it didn't work. And the animation was good. You know, and Pete just turned to me in dailies and he said, I think this just needs to be heroic. I was like, that one word, heroic.
Yeah.
And I went back and I went the most John Wayne I could do. I did an uppercut. He's literally like that, and he pops him with his uppercut.
Yeah, I remember that shot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Yeah.
And it was like the word intention told me everything I needed. I didn't need help as an animator. I just needed the director.
Yeah.
I needed to know what we needed as an acting moment. And that's something about previs that I really like. Is you're finding those things. And it doesn't matter if it's wobbly.
No.
You know, as long as you can animate. But what changed me there is when I started to animate shots, I now work completely from intention. So I start really messy and crude, and I get the intention right.
Yeah.
And then I fight with everyone above me into how smooth do I have to make it. Right? It's like, his finger like this. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
My initial thing that I want to show on my first dailies is that's the shot. Right?
Yeah.
And I could argue, don't look at the feet.
Yeah.
That's the shot,
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that the Peter Jackson end taught me a lot of.
Yeah. I think that's amazing. It really, I feel it just added on what my feeling of it was, because I've only done a little bit of previs, but it's like you're tied in, you're closer to the core of the whole project, which I always feel like I'm too far away from as an animator. Like, you really feel like a cog in the wheel in a in the machine in the big popcorn factory or whatever. And then in previous, you get a little bit closer and you get to feel the story a little bit, and you get to feel part of it. And then if you can help it along in some way, of more than just a cherry on top with animation, that I totally recognize that feeling. I think
you don't get that handcrafted thing at the end, and nobody sees it, and you kind of lose that moment in the theater where you're like, I did that.
And that's
you have ideas in there.
Yeah, and that's probably why some animators shy away from it, because you don't get that cool, this is mine, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna put it on my reel, and then that's mine. But like you said, you have the privilege and the experience of being close to the filmmaking in previs.
Yes, and I've always been a fan of just trying to figure out, again, I spent my first sort of 6 years as an animator just honing the craft of being a really good animator. And about 5 years into Tippett, it was like a Marine Corps. Like I could go anywhere and do any creature. Like, give it to me.
Yeah.
Give me a dragon, I'll kill it. Kill it. Give me a dinosaur, I'll kill it. Whatever. And that was what I really worked on for a long time. And after you had kind of that skill it's never second nature, because you always bleed a little on a shot. But once I had done enough of that, the calling for how would you make a sequence became okay, let me see if I can figure that out.
Yeah.
Or be good at that part. And then the previous team that they had, there's a guy named Jamie Beard, who's excellent. He would do a thing where when we would have these little meetings and you would kind of pitch out ideas, and you'd say something and somebody would laugh uncomfortably. Jamie would be like, let's pull that thread. You laughed for a different reason, but it still pulled something out of you. So what does that mean? And so being around people who are thinking like that about shots is really cool.
Yeah. And you did it for quite some time, was it? Like in the previous department?
Yeah, I did it for a couple of years. And the third Hobbit was the biggest sort of undertaking.
Oh, I bet. That was a huge scale. And were you supervising previous at that point?
Yeah. That was really great. It was a really great time. It was just, everything was full bore. We were in the just get it. We had to get this thing done.
Yeah.
There was a really great crew. Most of the previs people you don't even really need to check on. So, it's like having really good animators that, you have your team that, I can just, they're going to come back to me with something.
Yeah.
And so you would go, okay, we got to do this part of the film. What's it going to be? And then you'd kind of assign in casting who's good, who wants, and then see what they come back with. And then bring that into Pete. And you could never tell, is the thing. You could never look at somebody's previs and say he's going to like or not like that. Never.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You could never tell. So you had to just trust the suit that was coming, bring it in and show him. There's great ideas that didn't fly at all.
Yeah.
And you put something up that would be bombastic, and he'd go like, that, I like that, you know, or it would stay around longer.
Yeah.
You know, so
did you lead your team with that idea of starting with the intent as well? Was that part of what you would tell them, or how would you handle the feedback?
Well, mostly, I mean, honestly, in that case, the previous artists there are they're so great, and they had been there churning for a long time that I kind of jumped into a pretty oiled machine.
Oh, nice.
Right. So I remember it was mostly, a lot of it had to do with just the meetings with Peter and, and making sure, you know, like he knew, you knew what he was talking about.
Yeah.
For the team, you know, so it's a lot of that communication is important.
Yeah, of course.
You walk in a room, you don't want to say too much, you don't want to say too little. you know, you want to let them know, you know, you have to be. It's very strategic.
Oh, I bet.
Because they could be exhausted. There could be a mountain of things they have to look at. You know.
Yeah.
You come walking in there like, Pete. You know, this is not the right day for that.
No. Yeah.
So I basically, there's an animator I worked with at Tippett named Hans Brecke, who's one of the best animators I know.
I think I know that name.
Yeah, he's legend.
Yeah.
We did a bit where we did this bear. This guy turns into a bear and joins the fight, and there's a lot of it is in the special features.
Nice.
And we kind of planned it out. We came up with an idea, and then Hans just went in there and did it. And the way that, like, I work with somebody like Hans is like, he doesn't need my help at all as an animator. The guy's amazing. But where I can help him is I can pile things onto him in a way that he like let's throw 4 more guys on it, you know, and he would say, "You son of a, okay, let's go. I'll see you tomorrow," you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, and there's some, you know, and then I think this is all across the board. There's some people who just don't want you to just leave me alone.
Yeah.
I'll bring it to you, my little thing, you know.
Yeah.
So I found that I employed a lot more strategy were supervising on like a Godzilla film, because the last Godzilla movie that I did, there was really, really talented animators, but so many were very new to the game. Because at a place like Weta, you had people who just really were constantly knew what they were doing, were in the machine, and you're just kind of keep feeding it.
Yeah.
And then I found Godzilla was a little bit more of like, okay, I got to work with this person this way and this person that way.
Which Godzilla was that?
It's like the King of the Monsters, the one with Rodan and Ghidorah, the second movie.
Oh, right. Yeah, and was that at was there still what? NPC? Okay, yeah. NPC, yeah. There must have been a different environment, because the other studios. Well, there's Weta, and then there's the others, right? And then there's a lot of people going through the other ones. So suddenly working with a younger crew, where you have to talk about actual, like, you have to be on top of the animation. That's not a thing that you can take for granted that they would just know. So
yeah.
And then
and there's like, I always joke, there's like the stages of an animator, you know, and there's like I can't see it.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's I see it, but I'm not confident enough to do it. You know, and then there's I know more than the director. And each person that you go to, you got to do a different dance. So if it's just as simple as they can't see it, you have to help them go, oh, yeah. Phil did to me back in the days.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody who's just not confident, your job is to get them to get there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I worked with an animator on the Godzilla. It was brilliant. He'd gotten really difficult shots, really tough stuff to do. And my job was to basically help him simplify it so we can edit, right? Like, you know, just forget it. Let's start this simple. And then walk him off the ledge when there was notes.
Yeah.
you know, and then we got into a really good relationship, and we'd get going, and then he'd go, okay. I know what to do.
Yeah.
And then I'd leave, and he'd get in there and do it. So, you know, there are things like I would say, oh, this is like a Western. And you'd find out, you know, so much of the crew hadn't seen The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. It's fun for me because we'd pile them into the theater and say, first of all, you're going to realize exactly how much Quentin Tarantino steals. Second of all, this is this moment. But it's a Western.
Yeah.
And seeing people, like those little flashbulbs go out, and seeing people connect to, oh, that's what that is, right?
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
And if I'm jumping too far ahead, just stop me. It was I first saw flashes of your work on LinkedIn when you posted a drawing. It was really cool. Kind of like a comic book style. You mentioned some references. There was Bill Watterson was one of them, and Frazetta and more. And it seems like you're kind of exploring a lot of different outlets. And now, what are you pursuing at the moment?
Well, I'll tell you, my art style is weird. I've always been in this weird position where my hand drawn stuff is a bit cartoony. The things I like are like horror movies and, you know, blood splashing. so like my hand touches, like Guillermo del Toro saw a sketchbook of mine and he said, "Who likes fucking Mad Magazine?" I was like, he's so right, you know. So I've always done a lot of art, and I would do a thing, especially with long play blasts. I would do a thing where it's, you know, I would just have a pen and a piece of paper, and whenever I'd hit render, I would just doodle real quick.
Yeah.
To just draw every day. My art style is very cartoony, and I have a very funny story about interviewing with Tippett that I'll tell you in a bit. But so years ago I had this idea where I was going to either have a modeler and a rigger build me a library of like horror, like Frankenstein, werewolf, my versions.
Nice.
And I would animate those, or dinosaurs. And then I made this decision, I'll have the dinosaur library built. And whenever I just am mad at the world and I want to animate for me, I'll just pull out a dinosaur and, you know, I say when the shot's done.
Yeah.
And then off of that, I would, like, if I was at Tippett, I would find the guys who loved cameras and shooting stuff, and we'd go off and film the live action monster stuff. So I did like a short film of live action of vampires or zombies or werewolves. And that was like to just learn all the mistakes quick.
Yeah.
Because animation is so glacial. It's like we'll go out for a weekend with a camera and realize how hard it is to make a minute interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to animating and finding out how hard it is. Right?
Yeah.
Takes 6 months to find out your idea sucks. So one of the things I've been churning on for a long time is this dinosaur short film that I sort of took out and I've been pretty serious about for the last couple months.
Oh, nice.
So it's sort of just trying to make characters out of dinosaurs that we aren't chasing people and do something that's like a nature documentary, but with all of the drama of a movie.
Oh, that's
like
amazing.
If you put those two things together and just make it with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So I've been concentrating pretty hard on that project, and I have a couple animators that I worked with on Godzilla who wanted to keep doing stuff. So I would cast them off a sequence and getting amazing stuff back too. So it's been great.
I just want to let you tell that story, the hiring story from Tippett you mentioned.
Okay. And I got to readjust for this one.
Yes.
All right. So okay, I was working at this stop-mo kid show called Bump of the Night. Very cool.
Yeah.
Really fun in San Francisco. And I had sculpted this T-Rex in my version. And granted, it was pretty cartoony. And this wonderful man named Nick, who knew Phil, saw my sculpture, walked over to the phone, said, "Come here," called Phil, said, "You need to talk to this guy," and put me on the line with Phil Tibbett.
Wow.
Now, you have to understand, back then, like, I didn't know or care who Spielberg was or Kubrick, but I knew who made the fucking Tauntauns. So it was like intimidating beyond belief. And he said, "Well, what do you want? You want to come in and show me some stuff?" And okay, yeah. So all of a sudden I had this interview. And I brought in my portfolio. I brought in my reel on tape. I brought this stupid dinosaur sculpture. And this guy I worked with came over, who had heard about it, and literally saw my sculpture and said, "You're going to show that to Phil Tibbett. You're going to show that to Phil Tibbett. This guy sees museum quality pieces, and you're going to show him that." And I was like, I don't have anything else. I'm panicking.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, that's all I got, So I go there, and Phil put in my reel, and I would say 7 seconds he watched. Like, he put it in, and then he shut it off, and he said, "Well, it's more of that, isn't it?" And then he looked at my portfolio and he said, "I don't like cartoons. I don't draw cartoons. And I don't really get along with people. I don't really understand why you would draw cartoons." And I was like, "I wanted you to know I could draw, But he loved the dinosaur.
Oh, nice.
And so, like, he kept looking at it. He'd look under it. And then he said, "Well, we're doing this Starship Troopers thing. What do you think?" And showed me the tests for Troopers. And I picked, like, white, so scared to do it. But again, that was one of those things where, and this is really important to me, I won my artwork, like my cartoony end, that would have railroaded me in every other interview about Phil. Like, he saw past my garbage.
Yeah.
And took a real big chance on me. And I came in and everything was fine. and you know, like my stupid cartoony drawings and whatever. It really didn't fly at all. But since then, I've seen the industry is so fragmented. Like game guys look at creature animators and go, well, but can you do games?
Yeah.
And Pixar guys go, well, we're just worried you can't go, whoa. and you know, and there's all of this to me, and it's like, if you're a good animator, maybe you might need you may need somebody to be a little bit patient with you to help you walk through that corridor to the other door. But like, don't tell me I can't do it. It's timing and posing.
I agree.
You know, and like, I have no patience for people who push us into these compartments.
Yeah, I like that you say compartments, because that's what it is. It's like a desire to box people so that they know this is the box that we choose from, this is the box that we don't like, and we don't have time to wait for you to figure out the dialect of animation or so. But like you said, if you're a good animator, or if you're becoming a good animator, you can pivot and you can figure out, oh, this language is slightly different, and it's it's I think that's why people like me today romanticize the studios back then, because you know, when it was a bit more wild and you figured stuff out together, and this even the technology was new, and now there's like this streamlined thing where you are compartmentalized based on what you've done before. But then how are you supposed to evolve? And like with you, like building this whole sense of cinematography and filmmaking, it would have been a lot harder if no one let you. If they said, well, you don't have any previous to show, so what, you know, it's so important that someone, like you said, takes a chance on someone.
Yeah, and the reasons for them not to, I understand it. You know, I mean, like, basically, it's a industry built on fear to some degree, and you know, you'll work at a place where there's a supervisor who's just a complete and utter knucklehead.
Well, it happens, yeah.
And they are mean, and they make you do flip-flops for no reason. You know, there's all this stuff. And then after, you think, like, why do they keep getting hired? Why did I mean, it's obviously such a problem. And the answer is because they finished the job. And in our industry, you can keep going if you finish something. You know, so there's a bit of bad behavior that can keep going, understandably, because people only want to invest in somebody who can finish the damn thing.
Yeah.
So I think that breeds some bad behavior. And that's a hard thing to figure out how to solve that, you know?
Yeah.
But I am lucky where I came from the thing where with, like, on Troopers, I had dailies in front of the whole studio. Wow. Right? So there was no, you're just at your desk. And I got yelled at, and I mean yelled at. I got yelled at in front of an entire studio more than 5 times, dressed down.
Oh.
Right? And I could say I deserved every one of them. The fear of going on stage, the fear of walking into a room and knowing your shot is going to go up and everyone's going to look at it is terrifying, but a good thing. Right? The panic of that world, I think the communication of that world is a really good thing. And I'm sad that a lot of animators miss that. Phil is a person that once he knows you can do shots, is the most freedom I've ever had. I mean, the most difficult shots I've done is this wolf fight I did on one of those stupid Twilight movies.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't even know the camera was so whack they didn't even know how they were going to do it. I asked this guy, Tom Gibby, I said, give me the hardest thing you got. Give it. I want it. And it was like 3 or 4 shots of this wolf fight. And the cameraman went out to a field and just started spinning.
Oh, no.
So I had to fly these wolves with a camera and make them look like they were doing things. Like they were stepping on things.
Yeah.
It was cheated beyond belief.
I bet.
I mean, you couldn't have cheated it more. And the notes I got from Phil were, do you know what you're doing? Do you need anything from me? When are you done? Is it done?
That's trust.
Right? Yeah. I've gone from that to like, I don't know. Should we try his finger?
Yeah.
No trust whatsoever.
Yeah.
So for me, I have a hard time. I don't badmouth and do stuff like that, but it's very hard to have that much trust from somebody who is that, versed. And move over to somebody he's like, well, we're afraid you can't do. Yeah.
But I also think there's no need to badmouth anyone because it's an industry-wide problem with and as a supervisor, I can only imagine I've only had the chance to lead, but as a supervisor, sometimes they're under so much pressure as well that the easiest way to get through it fast enough is to just micromanage, and then we'll figure it out after, that kind of thing. And that's a shame too. But I do agree with you that it's a horrible position to be in, where you've been given so many notes where it's like what we would call pixel fucking, where it's like why am I just a monkey pressing the buttons? Or I have ideas, but it's like there's not enough trust or time to actually investigate and figure it out together. So yeah,
and sometimes, I mean, some of the best bits that I've done, I would, again, this goes back to working with Hans. I used to sit next to Hans, who's just a Viking in every way. He was just like, he looked like a Viking, he sounded like a Viking, and his animation was like worthy of swords and beer. Amazing.
That's amazing.
And there's times like we would, I would know that at 3 o'clock, it was 8 a.m, and at 3 o'clock today, I got to show Phil something, and I have nothing. So every move I make has to be uphill. I have to be. I can't go down the wrong road. So I would sit down, I would turn to Hans and say, I have to ride to battle today, which means we can't talk about, politics and what colors we like. I have to ride to battle. And Hans would say, I would be honored to fight with you.
Oh, that's amazing.
So we would do this thing where all day long you animate, and I would go, and he would go, move that, do that, do that. Okay, go. And then, and at 3, Phil could walk through the door and rip me apart on this one, but I got something,
Yeah.
And there's like just a beamed focus on that kind of thing. And for me, that's a great scenario. I don't like those days.
No.
I'd rather have coffee and talk about what color I like, but you really kind of churn through it and it helps you super focus. But one of the things that I learned doing that was, once I realized it stinks what I'm doing, I call it the machete. I would take out my machete and I would just cut it. So I would cut from like where it started sucking to all the way here out.
Yeah.
And redo it. Or cut it out, redo it.
Yeah.
Out, redo it. And one of the things I don't like about the pixel thing is you can get blind really quickly.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you need to do is just erase it. And start again, fresh, and you'll have a whole different problem, but you'll have solved your, So for me, it's faster to kill it and redo it than it is to fix it.
Yeah, I feel like when you end up screwing with individual frames, and then it's also a symptom of not really knowing what the real problem is, and then it's usually just forced, or it never really worked. And then, as you say, you're gonna, first of all, you're gonna get to something cool faster when you cut it out, because you have a fresh idea and you're riding on this adrenaline, and we just need to get there. And then the joy of seeing something happening really fast with the poses, then especially after you spend maybe a few days fucking with these 10 frames, then you might, I fully agree.
You just want to go in there with a shotgun.
Yeah. And you can, if you have a good supervisor, you can't get it past them anyway. So you may as well just admit it, be honest, and just swallow it. Yeah, that's how it is.
Which is why I think, for me, animating, getting the intention right is crucial, because you could have something that kind of works but is wrong, like my punch, and follow that forever, or a version 100, you're still noodling this thing that just didn't really work. And if you can, it's another thing that I sort of bring, I think, from the stop motion days, is when you have a stop motion puppet, you take your little Allen wrench and you go through and you do a pass where you kind of get the puppet where you like it.
Yeah.
One thing is you figure out, if I gotta cut a hole into this thing mid shot, I have to tighten it here. I have to tighten it here. You figure out where all your little bits are.
Yeah.
And you go through and sort of get the puppet working. And on sort of the best shots I've done, I think I've mimicked that, whereas I would get the shot cast to me, watch the plate, kind of come up with a plan. Then I would take the puppet and I would go through every bit and move everything. And just sort of go through the same process. You spread the legs and you see okay, that's as far as it could step. Yeah. But if I bend this foot, I actually get more. And I'll need that later. And you're just sort of making these notes. And then as I'm doing that, I get him into that first pose as I'm working the puppet. And by that point, I've got my idea and my intention down, usually. By that first pose, then I know what I'm doing. And then I block on 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20.
Yeah.
Because I hate counting. So I just pose through.
Yeah.
And then start to accordion it until it feels right, if my timing's all screwy. And then from there, I'm usually good to see if that's the right idea.
Wow, that's cool to hear how informed it is by your stop motion days.
Yeah, and it really helps. I mean, it's just, and it's even simple. It's when you first start out animating, you're animating this thing, and you have the hands like paddles, and you don't really care about those yet. You're doing all this work, and it doesn't feel right. And then it's if you pose it in the Dracula hand, that looks cool from every angle. So no one notices your hands. Yeah. Something sometimes that simple is just, if you start with that pose,
I agree. Yeah.
No one's going to notice the fingers for a long time. You learn. There's a lot of little things you learn to get you through that first pass.
Yeah. That's amazing. And then you'll have fewer people messing with you about a figure tip.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're coming up. Oh, I was gonna say we're coming up to an hour, but it's been an hour and 10 almost. So I wanted to finish off with there was an interview with Phil Tibbett in what was it called? Fangoria magazine.
Right.
Where you mentioned as one of the animators who revived his Mad Dog venture, his horror stop motion that's in festivals now, I believe. And yes. Would you mind sharing that story of how that happened?
Well, yeah, it's pretty awesome. I mean, Phil, again, we used to do, Phil had the Mighty Joe Young armature on a shelf. He, like you go to Phil's office or whatever, and he have these amazing armatures lying around. And every now and then you'd say to him, "Come on, let me animate that." Knock it off. To let me take a crack at that shit. And he'd go, "No." And then the next day he'd roll up and it would be in a brown bag. And he'd say, "Don't wreck it." So he was always really cool about that, if you were really interested in something. And we had gone to a lunch type of thing and stopped by his studio, his home studio, and he had all this Mad God stuff on the shelf. Now, I'd seen years before some of the footage that he was archiving. So I'd seen that footage and knew that he had this project that was pretty dark.
Yeah.
And again, it's something I never seen anything like it.
No, yeah.
The world of stop motion, it's something else.
Yeah.
So I basically said, "Come on, when are you gonna let me take a crack at that shit? Stop being an asshole about it, and let me animate one of those guys." More or less half joking, but wanting to do it.
Yeah.
And he came in, I think a couple of days later, with a storyboard. And he said, "There's all the stuff. Build a set. If you're really interested, you build a set." And that's how it started. And I just started taking things off the walls and screwing them together. And you just go in there and start building stuff. Put a camera down, and then at a certain point he came in with a puppet and we arranged it and did the shot of this guy coming out and revealing with a light. They originally had it because it was from the 80s. They had a little light and the wire went down and out his foot.
Oh, okay.
And me and this guy named Simo, we came up with the idea of switching it to an LED light and then putting it in a battery pack. So he was free now. We didn't have to worry about hiding wires. And in the middle of the thing, Phil would come in and just say, "Do this, do that. Here's how I do this. Here's how I do that." And he'd sort of help you get the set. Then we just started animating. And I did a bit of a sequence. And from there, the project rolled into enough people wanted to do it. And he started, I think, assigning off other shots. So it was really, really cool. I was really psyched to help jumpstart it. I mean, it was one of these things that he was always going to do.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to be right there in a place, say something stupid enough to have him take me serious, and then, but the amount of work that they did post my shots is monumental. I did a sliver and maybe helped get people around the studio to get into it too, take that leap. But the amount that they did after that is unbelievable. It's a crazy.
Yeah.
Going to go down in the journals.
The dark journals. Yeah. I've only seen the trailer, but it's dark.
One of my favorite things is on the Godzilla, the King of the Monsters thing, I had all these young animators and everyone wanted to be in Pixar.
Of course.
So they're animating Godzilla, but they really want to be animating a squirrel slipping on a bowl of nuts and saying Godzuki.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, oh, you like Pixar? I want to show you this film. And then get them all into the theater. And we had this one thing where we projected a bit of Bad God. And for me to just watch people, like, lose their, like, you couldn't be any farther from Pixar.
Oh, that's so good.
You know? And
Yeah.
it's so much fun. Yeah. Really cool.
But I think you did them a favor in reminding them what animation also is. It doesn't have to be this one thing. And if we're too rigid on something, then we're missing out, I think.
Yes, and there's a world. I mean, you know, are you familiar with like Spankmeyer? Jan Spankmeyer?
No, I'm not. No.
He was an animator who used materials, and I won't ruin any of it for you. I'll just say, look up on the internet some Švankmajer. He did Alice in Wonderland. And it's some of the most bizarre stuff you could see. It's not as dark, but there's like a whole world of stuff that people have been producing that doesn't fit in that kid category.
Yeah.
That's really worth the time to see it. You know, they're really amazing films, and people broke a lot of boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, there's some cool stuff out there for sure.
I'll put a note on that in the footnotes of this as well. Spankmeyer.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Well, Randy, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. Thank you, man. This was so much more than I hoped for. This was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you need to recap anything, because I was talking shit, just let me know.
I will. But yeah, thank you again so much, and good luck with your dinosaurs. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, take care, man.
See you.